Let's go. Oh, got it. Cool. We're live. Well, it's funny. I was having that same conversation with somebody the other day about are we actually going to have an enterprise outside sales motion again? Are we actually going to be getting on planes and shaking hands and kissing babies and doing that whole thing? I don't know yet. I hope. I enjoy that part of it, but I think there's going to be a shift. And sorry, everyone. Welcome to shOPS Talk. Andy and I are catching up. We're all getting settled. So grab a drink, grab a water, whatever you want, and we'll get started in a second. But yeah, it's going to be a new territory for a lot of folks, I think, from an outside sales mentality. I'm interested to see what happens with it.
Events are changing so rapidly too, right? I was talking to somebody and they used to run events and they're now no longer. They said their email got blown up in the last 2 months for like people starting to come back with in-person events. And so if like that plus sales, it'll be really interesting to see like what the budgets for events are.
Yeah.
In the future.
Yeah. Yep. You're spot on. I think the cool thing there, and again, welcome everyone to shOPS Talk. We will get started in about 20 seconds. We'll just let everybody get settled and get in and get situated. The coolest thing there, I think, is going to be marketing budgets are going to stay about the same. Last 2 years, everybody's been kind of drawing out of that field marketing and the events budget to do other things. It'll be curious to see how that shift happens. But yeah. With that being said, man, we got a big group and we got a lot to talk about. We'll get everything kicked off. Andy, thanks for being here, man. I'm pumped to have you. But for everybody that's joined, thank you for jumping in with us. Hopefully this is not your first shOPS Talk, but if it is, welcome. We're excited to have you. The cool thing about shOPS Talk, this is a totally organic experience, built from the ground up, all through WizOps. We wouldn't be here, especially without our fantastic sponsors over at Salesforce, making sure that we're still able to do this and helping us sponsor it. So as always, we appreciate that team and everything they do. And we're going to jump right into it. There's a lot of things going on in the world right now. There's a lot of noise out there. I think we can all probably agree with that. Don't worry, we're not going to have many geopolitical conversations or macroeconomic conversations right now. We will talk about cutting through the noise within your business because there are times it can be noisy. We all know that. And there's nobody better to talk to about this topic than my good friend, advisor, everything in between under the sun. I've known Andy for so long. Andy, I'm excited to be here. Tell everybody who you are, what you do, and how they can especially find you.
Yeah, absolutely. Andy Mowat. I have run go-to-market operations and demand gen at 3 unicorns, Upwork, Box, and most recently Culture Amp. Now I'm starting a new company, launching publicly next week, Gated, which basically we reduce the noise in InMail. We are building the first tool to help users control the flood of marketing and give them back control of their own inbox. RevOps is one of our favorite personas, and I've been fascinated by what Brad's building it for a long time. So really great to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm for everybody on here, I am dropping Andy's LinkedIn in the chat. So definitely go flood his inbox, go jump on, hang out with him. I will have to say, again, I've known Andy, I've known you forever, seemingly. Can't thank you enough, especially in the early days as we were starting Sonar, just being a voice for us and being a sort of a sounding board for me and Jack, especially to, as we build this product, because you have such a product focused mindset and you've had product experience, but also obviously we work with operations folks all day, every day, not only in WizOps, especially in our community, but from our product side perspective. So Andy's been critical in how we build our product, how we navigate our roadmap, and can't thank you enough for all the help and support. So same thing, same excitement that I've got for what you're doing with Gated right now. I think this is actually going to be a massive game changer for everybody, especially cutting through the noise of their inbox. But we're going to go through what that noise looks like, especially from an inbox perspective, but just as importantly, from an overall perspective of how we do business. But before we get too far, we want to hear from everybody here. We got a lot of folks on the webinar. We're about to launch a poll with a very easy question. What's your biggest distraction at work? We didn't put an answer here for geopolitical things that are going on or macroeconomics or what the market's doing. We will leave that outside of the 4 walls of this conversation. But there's a lot of things that can distract us in our workday. So you've got a couple options here. Fielding requests from go-to-market teams. Yes, these are centric to operations folks. Congratulations, we're here in WizOps. Navigating tech debt, fixing tech stack breaks. So put your answers in. We'll share those answers here in a second. But man, fielding requests from go-to-market is from go-to-market teams is an overwhelming 77%. Honestly, not surprised on that. So, and would love to hear from everybody here. Again, please this is a very interactive session. Please drop your comments in the chat, ask questions. If there was something that is distracting that we didn't put as a selection, toss it in there. We'd love to hear that. But as we kick things off, I really want to start diving right in, Andy. When we think about RevOps teams being better protective of their time, we all know time is the biggest commodity from an operations perspective. I don't think anybody here, hopefully, maybe you can prove me wrong, nobody here on this call, I doubt carries a quota. RevOps people in general do not carry a quota. So rather than protecting the time with customers, it's so much time for building and communicating with your current team. When you think of protecting your time and the attention, how can RevOps teams better protect their overall time, their biggest commodity, their biggest asset?
Yeah. And we'll get into gated later on. I think we can talk about the resources. This is I don't think I've ever met a soul in RevOps that says I've got enough resources, I've got enough time. The memes that Sonar's dropping and a couple other amazing people are dropping, like they're all real and we all feel that pain. I think I have spent a lot of time thinking about that. And I probably throughout my entire career have spent like 1% to 2% of my total time as a RevOps leader advocating and creating the right mechanisms so we can always have the right resources. I think at the fundamental level, it's less about like, can I get more resources? It's much more around, I need to force my stakeholders to make trade-offs. So when somebody comes and asks you and says, hey, I need this, I need this, I need this, the wrong answer is, yeah, I got it. I'll get back to it. Like I'm on it, right? The much better answer is like, here are the 7 things I have in order of priority. Like, where would you put this one? Or here's where I would put this one. And here's how I'm looking at it. And it's a not now. And this is what I'm looking at over it. I find that level of maturity and then being able to like visualize that for your stakeholders is critical. And then what becomes insanely powerful is when people start, instead of complaining about the fact that they're not getting what they're needing, they start flipping to advocating for you to get more resources. So that's the fun. And I'm sure we'll dive deeper into that, and happy to take questions on it as well too. But I advise a lot of RevOps leaders on exactly this, right? Like, how do you not get bowled over by your stakeholders?
Yeah, I think this is candidly, one of the biggest challenges that we feel in the ops world, especially as we've made this shift from siloed operations to revenue operations. Congratulations. You're not supporting one group anymore or one entity. You're supporting many. And I think the hardest part of that is so much of it can be out of sight, out of mind to the other party. As an example, you're fielding requests all day long. That was obviously the biggest response that we got from the poll. You're getting so many requests from go-to-market teams. So in this example, you've got 3 requests come in from marketing today. You've got 5 requests come in from sales, and you got 2 come in from finance. We'll play that scenario out. Congratulations. The marketing team has no clue about those requests from finance or sales, and vice versa. And I think the one thing that I always suggest to folks is, bang your hands on the table, be transparent. They don't know what they don't know. So it's your job as a RevOps leader to actually educate and inform them and be very, very vocal and transparent with what your task list looks like. We see this all the time. We had our good friend Pete Kazanji on here the other day talking about that, where use something, pick your flavor, pick your poison. It could be Jira, it could be Trello, it could be Asana, it could be anything as far as some of these project management boards. Monday is another one. Have that, share it with everybody. And the level of empathy you're going to get behind that from the other departments, like, oh man, I had no clue you were going from a HubSpot to Pardot transition for the marketing team. I wouldn't have asked you to update that one field for our sales opportunity if I knew that. So the more transparent you can be, the better you're going to be off.
I would agree. The one thing I would say on that is, I do find that most stakeholders won't engage in those task management systems unless that task management system is like ingrained in the whole way. So oftentimes like marketing teams will be on Asana, and maybe you can get it into them that way. But, I've ended up like, I run our teams off of those task management systems, but it ends up being like a PowerPoint or a Google Sheet of like 1-page idiot proof. Here are my top 10 like big projects, and here's how I'm looking at them. And then like, we've got this small bucket for little time that you just got to trust us that we're prioritizing the right way, because I think you can overwhelm them with minutia too, and then they'll tune out. I've seen that happen a lot.
100%. One thing that I stole from Jack a long time ago, you'll appreciate this from the product standpoint. When him and I were working together at our first company, he, from a product management perspective, he sent out release notes to the team like, hey, we just made this update in the app. Here it is. It was one of the first times really working for a product-based company like that I saw release notes come through. And I remember his first version was just really funny to me because he would always add like GIFs and funny memes and stuff like that. I was like, well, I'm going to turn that around to the same thing just from the RevOps side. I'm going to send it to the entire go-to-market team. It's just going to be my weekly release notes. Here are the 5 fields that I created. Here's the new process you're going to follow for sales to success handoff. And so pick your poison. Again, your mechanism and your medium for getting that message out there can be different. But again, be transparent. I can bang my hands on the desk type thing. Talk. Be vocal, be very, very omnipresent in that whole thing.
I love to your point on that email and the release notes. I did that. So at Box, there was one of the head of analytics sent out a weekly email where he had like one insight, and it like I joined and the CEO said like, this is required reading. And so I was like, okay, we model our whole RevOps thing after that. So we sent out an email every week, and you could opt in and subscribe, and pretty much every go-to-market leader did. We made it super simple. Like, what's one data insight we've seen that you haven't probably thought about? What's one thing you've asked us or one feedback that has made us better because we wanted to encourage that? And then like, what's the coolest thing we're working on right now? And that was it. It was, and people like read it and forwarded it to their teams, and that really works. So I'm a big fan of like being transparent and then like telling your story over and over and over again.
Yep. If you think you're over communicating, you're probably not. Just keep doing it. So no such thing as over communication. Here's a fun one. We talked a little bit about this in this first question, but we're going to double click into it now. How do you know when it's the right time to push back and say no as a RevOps leader?
I don't think it's actually an interview question I do. I'll ask the open-ended loaded one, which is how do you say no? And there's right answers and wrong answers to this. I think what I'm really looking for is you're not ever actually saying like, no, I'm sorry, we can't do that. But I think what you're assessing is like, can I guide them to a better solution? Can I help them realize there's something that exists that they can use instead? Or can I show them how deep down that priority list they're going to be? And then they'll kind of probably kind of fade out on their own, the final one's really helping them understand like how I'm prioritizing. So I'm never actually saying no, but you're kind of sweet talking them a little bit, and they're like, oh yeah, I kind of get that this one's not going to get done. I think if you say no, what ends up happening is they go get budget from somebody else. You end up having an orphan tool, and then you're whacking it away forever. So I think what you really want is like this SDR department, the sales department, the CS, the marketing, like all coming to you to like partner with you on tools decisions versus seeing you as a blocker and then going around you. And then you're just going to end up dealing with the chaff later on. So my job is to smile very politely, say no in a way where they don't actually think I'm saying no.
Yeah. I think some of the best versions I've heard of that same like type of strategy. It's like, yeah, yes, when. You say yes, and I'm going to do this when I can get around to it, or I can do this when I get to the bottom of my priority list, or I get to these other 5 tasks that are obviously more pressing and more important. There's an entire like a great blog post that I can look it up in a little bit, and we'll add a link to it, of saying no poetically. And it's just the right way to say you want to be transparent. You don't want to lead people on, but you have to do it in such a politically correct way. So a great blog post. We'll find it in a second. The thing that I think we all keep in mind here, especially as far as like being conscious of our time, how to remove the noise, has so much to do with the resources on our team. I think we look at this sometimes, especially this RevOps revolution that we're in right now. This pendulum is swinging so far right now of it's no longer a 1-person show or even 2-person show. We look at all the companies that we both work with. We got Faraz Abdel over at Outreach. I think his of a 1,000-person company at Outreach, I think his operations team is a little over 20 people now, which I absolutely love seeing. So many other examples. I know, Kyle and all the folks over at Sales Loft have the exact same like mentality with the way that Scott's building his team over there. And so, one of the other poll questions, we'll go ahead and launch this now. How do you feel about the resources your ops team has? A couple of options there. I know this is always going to be a fun one. Totally happy. They're all right. Need some work or not cutting it. How do you feel about the resources your ops team has? I'll be really curious to see how
I think, Brad, you and I can
how
predict when this one's coming out, but it'll be fun to see for sure.
I know I can almost predict the percentage of the answer being an overwhelmingly high one, but we'll see what the results look like. Okay,
Okay, we
I
knew
was
the number.
wrong.
Yeah, yeah. Well, if you remember that there's nothing on that top line, then that one
No.
makes perfect sense.
That's exactly it. Well, I mean, we'll unpack that. I think the thing that we all look at, and we can use Sonar as an example of this, Gated as an example of this, of having resources as far as software to do these things. But it's a no surprise there that it needs some work, or not cutting it, or they're all right, we're the majority. I think, I don't want your opinion of this, when you've seen this sort of evolution of how revenue operations has gone, and even for the folks that are on the call, I know some folks still have sales ops titles, perfectly fine, marketing ops, Salesforce admin, we're all collectively in this umbrella of operations. But I think undoubtedly we can all say that we're all wanting more and more resources, both people and software. When you think of juggling that, there's so many ways that you can accomplish your goals with this. Sometimes it can be resources, some kind of can be software. But when you think about grabbing resources, what's the first thing that comes to mind, and what strategy do you take when you're going to solve problems when you know resources are minimal for you?
Yeah, we already talked to kind of like making resources finite, which is kind of part of the forcing people to make trade-offs. I think that's my overall philosophy. I think another concept that I work with my teams a lot on is the concept of there's two buckets. There's run the business, and there's change the business. And run the business is all the things you're needing to do to just kind of keep the things running, and then change the business are those like game-changing projects. And I've started the concept's so simple. What's been really cool is my team started parroting them back to me of like, I'm feeling really high on run the business. So I'm like, okay, great. I can coach that. Why don't you tell me all the run the business tasks, and let's go through them and figure out which ones we can stop doing, which ones we can make better, which ones we can automate. And then on the change the business, I'm like, well, you're only going to have so much, and you've got to be able to pick and prioritize. So, first off, like that's very inspiring to people, and they're able to do it. And it really blew my mind like 3 years ago, where one of my team was like, hey, I'm blowing up on run the business. So people start to be able to self-manage on that. So I use those two concepts of kind of resources finite and RTB, CTB a lot.
Yeah. So, it's interesting. We'll unpack that, because we look at this so much about being efficient and making sure that we can cut through some of the noise. So often, I think this is part of the ecosystem that we all live in, almost by nature or a knee-jerk reaction. We think about how can we add something to make our day easier. So can we add a new tool? Can we add a new headcount? Can we add a new resource, whatever it be, to make that job a little easier? I think one of the questions that doesn't get asked too often, and you just said this, what can we take off our plate to actually do these jobs more efficiently? Because so much of it doesn't have to be additive. We can be sort of detractor, if you want. We can be more efficient. We can cut through some of this noise by eliminating some of the noise, not necessarily throwing software or more people at it. I think we've said this almost ad nauseum on this not this episode, but on Shop Talk in general. Everybody's always asking advice for what software should I go buy? Should I go buy this one or that one? There's so many of them out there. You're asking the wrong question first. Like, what process are you trying to build, or what problem are you trying to solve? Go do that first. Go understand your place first, and then actually go solve it with people or software or anything else. But you're gonna do the wrong thing if you just go buy something real quick and you think it's a silver bullet. So
yeah, I can't count the number of times I've walked with an ops person over to one of their stakeholders and been like, we think that this is a process that's really not that valuable anymore. Do you agree? And here's how we do it. And they're like, yeah, okay. And I'm like, okay, great. That one's off your list anymore. You don't need to do that one. So I think giving people the air cover to have those hard conversations with their stakeholders is important.
Oh, 100%. So we'll go back on track when we think about cutting through some of the noise and getting to be more efficient for your RevOps teams. There are a ton of resources out there. We're going to throw a couple of them out there. We're usually not the webinar to start throwing a bunch of logos out there and advocating for things, but there are legitimate things that we can go purchase, we can go install, we can go buy to help our days. What resources are out there that can help RevOps teams be more efficient? What comes to mind for you?
Yeah, I'll give three. I mean, first is like, there's this cool tool called text blaze. It's like / commands. I use it a lot. It just makes me a lot more efficient with things I type 100 times a day. Sonar is powerful, right? Like all those mappings that you have to like draw and document. And I really am excited. That's why you and I have been geeking out so much. And then obviously, like, you're probably overloaded with email. Every RevOps person is, because we have so many tools we own the decision processes on. So that's why we built Gated. It basically takes email from unknown people out of your inbox and challenges them to donate to your nonprofit to reach you.
Yeah, it is. I will tell you this is the most humanizing aspect of what Gate is doing. Again, cutting through the noise. We all know this to be true. It can be very noisy when you're a target of a sales cycle. Spoiler alert, everybody on this call is a target of the sales cycle. Everybody's ever going to watch this recording. Everybody always wants to sell you something or get in contact with you about that. The human nature that we can all provide for that is, again, so humanizing when, hey, I'm going to go donate $1 or $2 or whatever the threshold is to go get that, to make sure that that message gets through to Andy. And that's a great way of thinking about how to be a human for once. Absolutely. The one thing that I think about too, we use it here. Jack is a massive advocate for it. Command E software that's out there. You can quickly find, it aggregates all of your stuff. And so instead of doing Command F on certain applications and trying to find things, you can hit Command E and it's going to find it through some of your applications like Gmail, through Salesforce, through reports, through spreadsheets. And so it's just a massive, massive search engine. The reality is everyone here, we're all juggling a ton of data, a ton of ways to communicate between Slack, email, text message, messenger pigeon, however else you want to communicate with everybody. And we're all juggling a bunch of systems and data, and to be able to have that at your fingertips, find it very quickly, it's always important. So we do. Thank you, Sarah. We do have folks on here. We want to hear from you guys. Give us your questions. We definitely want to jump into it. We got about 8 minutes left. So I know a couple of familiar faces on here that folks that I've had plenty of conversations with can jump in and ask questions. I'll throw you a first one that I think will be intriguing, especially to everybody here in the RevOps world. We're in the movement. I don't think we're at the tail end of a movement. In all reality, I think that we're in the first mile of this marathon of what revenue operations does and how we actually go and continue to build what we're building through all these different companies. If you were to time box it to the next, we'll make it easy, 24 months, next 2 years, what do you think one of the big shifts or big changes that revenue operations has not gone through yet, but likely will go through over the next time horizon?
That's an easy one. I'm spending a lot of time talking to companies in the space because I'm just passionate about it and investing in a couple. Modern data stack. It is, I break it in, I'll make it really simple. Like there are a lot of questions, for example, that you can't answer in Salesforce because of the way their data is structured. So a great example is pipeline coverage, right? Like I want to look back at any moment in time and know how much pipeline did I have and how did that close? Like that's a very hard question. And when we were building out our RevOps team at Culture Amp, you know, the client, when we were interviewing people, like 95% of the RevOps people we interviewed were like, yeah, easy, totally. I download this from here in this spreadsheet and I manipulate it over here and I do this. And I'm like, no, like, do you know how to get that in real time in a configurable dashboard? And most people didn't. But in the next 2 to 3 years, I foresee a lot of systems. I think first your data layer and your visualization layer abstract above to the modern data stack. And then I do think the actual systems we use will get rebuilt on the modern data stack. I'm seeing that happen first with marketing automation, next with like PLG sales software, and people are poking around on it in the CRM space. So I think if you don't have a data background and DNA, I think you'll be left behind in 3 years in RevOps.
I can't agree with you more. I think here's the reality of that. The biggest piece of that, the modern day stack is growing. We all know that. There's a new piece of software out almost every day. We'll take our line from our good friends over at Andreessen. Software is eating the world. We know that. And that's fine. I think how we toggle it and how we juggle it and how we rationalize which ones we use and why is always going to be important. But your point on data, we are in a world now where there is more data than we know what to do with. And I think if we tied this whole thing back together to a lot of this topic, the signal to noise ratio, Brian, on our board, you know, Brian Murray over at Kraft, says this all the time. Are we tracking this because it's a signal, or are we tracking this because it's noise? We've got phenomenal data to go track it. Do we actually need to track the shoe size of our customer in Missouri? Probably not. So is that a valuable piece of data and how we do it? The amount of data that we're now subject to and toggling and juggling is massive. I think I'll say this, the one interesting conversation I've had most recently is hey, Brad, do you think like data warehouses and BI tools are now the thing of the future and they're going to take away the CRM at some point? I'm not going to go on the record right now in March of 2020 and say no or yes. I think it's an interesting question. I don't necessarily think CRM is going away. I think you're always going to have a UI and a user interface that you have your go-to-market teams need to use. And no bashing to anybody in go-to-market teams, but using a data warehouse or going into data science mentality is not up for everyone. It's a very tough skill to go have. So I don't think you're going to ever have anybody being power users of things like Tableau or things like that. But it is interesting that data is being used in a different way. Sometimes it's not necessarily in the epicenter of what we've always said, which is our CRM. It is sitting in other places. I think from a usability layer, you're always going to have the CRM side of things.
The one thing I could see happening is the database layer and the rules around it stay in Salesforce, but the UX goes to something like a Scratchpad or a Troops. Yeah. And so, I mean, that's not where they are now because they still rely upon that. But, you know, we all know that, and again, this is not me. I love Salesforce. It's been my whole thing, but the UX side and the database, the structure, what we can all do as RevOps people in it is amazing. And like that would be very hard to replace in some data warehouse layer. But we also know that we're inflicting a lot of damage on our teams with like point through this click, and the UX gets worse every year as Salesforce rolls out Lightning, and then they roll out the next thing, and you know, and so I think the UX of Salesforce, as our functionality as RevOps people gets better, I think the UX of Salesforce gets worse and worse for our end users, and that I think is where somebody like Scratchpad or Troops or all of them are starting to innovate on.
I know you also make my next couple of comments too easy. We talk about pipeline coverage and everything. We talked about having Pete on here. If you're checking things like that out, please go check out Atrium from a sales performance and metrics tracking perspective. We had Pui on Shops Talk sometime a long time ago, a couple months ago, time warp style, and we're actually having a Troops webinar in next week. But next week or the week after that, I got to look at my dates. So
we got a lot
it's funny that
yeah.
No, so we all keep a very, very tight circle. So I know we're getting close to the top of time. If you have any other questions, drop them in. I always love this one. This is my favorite question we ask everybody on every Shops Talk episode from the start of time. We had Manas Kulkarni from at the time CV Insights, now over at Spring Health. Manas was great, and he was one of the first people that really helped me get this question out. We're all on this RevOps journey together. Some of us have been on it for years. Some of us have been on it for days or weeks or months, but not for a long time. So I always encourage everybody, let's fire up the DeLorean. Let's go back in time. Let's go back to when you started in your operations journey, because you're still in operations journey, a little bit of a different role, but you've been in many of them so far. What would now Andy tell early Andy advice-wise of how to become a great revenue operations leader?
Make sure that, I think all of our roles are typically internally focused, right? Like all of our stakeholders are internal. Maybe we talk to a vendor or two here and there, but like fundamentally, probably most people listening to this are like, my role is an internal role. Make sure it's not just an internal role. I think my career path in ops opened up when I made it external. And I did that by writing. So I would write down my thoughts. I've written a RevOps handbook. I've write on a lot of the things, and I just share what I did. Two, I say we would bring in like once to twice a month, we would bring in a guest that had done something right. So we brought in like the Splunk marketing operations teams to geek out with us, or we would. And so I was big on like having a network of people that I could bring in and mind share. And I think anytime I'm trying to do something, you're going out and asking communities. Now, when I started my career, like WizOps didn't exist. Brad, you've built that, which is, I think, the first way we found each other. And it's really impressive. Like, you know, if you need to find something, now there are these great communities. And so that's another way to make it external. And then like, I tend to learn a lot from talking to vendors, and, you know, those become strategic if you engage them strategically. So like all of, and vendors will take you to dinners, they'll put you on stage. And so if you want to build your RevOps, like you can't just be a great RevOps practitioner. Doesn't mean you need to be like always influencer and talking about it, but I think, you know, just sharing your wisdom and wanting to geek out on calls is really will open up lots of doors for you.
I couldn't agree more. Ask questions, be curious, use your vendors. I'm going to double down on that comment. one of the very first, it wasn't even a webinar. This is, God, 6-7 years ago. Our good friend, Eric Martin, who was at Data Fox, now over at Vanta, he had me join a panel that he was leading one day. He was like, Brad, tell me about your RevOps team. He's like, I know you're a lean, mean team of 2, right? I was like, no, dude, I've got a team of like 30 plus people. There's 2 people that are internal to me. Yes, it's me and Todd, who's on my team. I look at every one of my vendors as someone on my team, and I use them heavily as that. I delegate to them. If I'm having trouble using something in SalesLoft or Outreach or Drift or Intercom, anything like that, I consider my counterpart over there on their CS team or account management team, whoever my point of contact is. I rely on them. They are part of my team. And it's a different little bit of a mindset, but you have to go and leverage that. You're purchasing their software. Yes, like that's a great thing to have happen. But we encourage all of our customers, I'm sure you do the same. I'm on your team. If you have a question, I may not know the answer to it. It might not perfectly be Sonar specific, but it's probably close. It's tangential enough for me to help find you the right answer. Leverage your vendors. It is such a crucial thing. I didn't do that early in my career. It took a while for me to realize I have a bigger team than just 1 or 2 people that were on my team at the time. So I love that answer. You're so spot on. So God, just like that, time flies when you're having fun. We're already 1 minute over, but Andy, can't thank you enough for jumping on with us, dropping knowledge. Again, we put your LinkedIn message in there, put your email in there. Everyone, please get a hold of Andy. Great guy to talk to, learn from. I can't tell you how much I've already learned in my time hanging out with you. So can't thank you enough for being here and dropping the knowledge on us.
Fun session, Brad. Thanks a lot.
Always. And thank you everybody for joining. We'll be back in 2 weeks for another great Shops Talk. If you have any questions, jump in WizOps, ping me or Andy. We're happy to help, and we'll talk to you all soon.
I'm in WizOps. We'll see you there. Bye.
All right. Have a good one, Andy. See ya.